I'd like to call the Board of Public Works meeting of September 1st to order and ask if anybody else besides LCAT is recording the meeting.
Shirley Tankletti for the minutes.
Okay. And our first item would be to review and approve the minutes of the meeting of August 12th.
So moved.
Second motion.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So that takes us within minutes right to the superintendent's report.
Thank you.
All right.
First thing I'd like to do is to make one staff announcement, and that is Frank Mirandi, who's currently serving as the assistant to the town engineer. As his title is retiring after 37 years of service to the town. He will be retiring as of the end of the day, October 2nd. Frank has worked hard, and he's put a lot of service into the town over the years. So we're going to be sad to see him go after as many years as he put in. He has accelerated his retirement date a little bit to deal with some family issues that he's dealing with. So
okay.
He had been looking forward to next year, and now he's decided he's going to retire this fall.
Okay.
It will give us an opportunity to really step back, reevaluate the position, the role of the position within the department, and take a look at what the department's current needs are and what changes may have occurred over the years, and really redefine and refill that position in the way that we feel is best and most appropriate for us going forward.
Okay.
Is he the longest?
Oh, I think Roy's got more time than that.
Roy has more?
Yeah, Roy Erickson has 40-plus years at this point.
Okay.
Yep, and Joey Goodwin is very close behind him as well.
Okay.
I did share one document with the board just for general information, and that's a document entitled Town of East Long Meadow Core Values, and I stamped a draft on that. And I added that to your packet late. It's a document that came out of the first meeting that Greg Moyer, the interim town administrator, had with department heads. And even though the Department of Public Works doesn't report to the Board of Selectmen, Greg invited myself as department head of the DPW and other similar department heads to attend the meeting. I think it was a good, productive meeting. It was a good chance for people to share ideas, information. He currently has it scheduled for a weekly meeting. He may end up backing off on that a little bit as we get into it a bit, but it's always good to get people together
Right.
and share information, share ideas.
Everybody's on the same page.
Right.
Working as a team.
One of the items he did share was this draft value statement, and I think it makes sense. It's similar to what he's used in other communities where he's worked, and it talks basically about some of the things that are really should be most important to us as we're doing our job. To be accountable, to be ethical, to look out for public safety, to respect employees and the public, teamwork, trust, things like that. So I think it's just good to revisit some of these concepts as a group, and I believe that was his intent.
Excellent.
Have a couple of items that deal with financial issues. I believe that are all positive things to talk about. One item is that we, this time of year, we typically get notification from the Springfield Water and Sewer Commission regarding what they refer to as the annual true-up or the annual adjustment of what our billing will be based on their actual costs in the previous fiscal year versus the cost that we've been billed for, and that would be looking backward at fiscal 15. And the word that we got from the Springfield Water and Sewer Commission last week was that we're to expect a small credit on the sewer side, which is fairly unique because I believe only East Long Meadow and Long Meadow of the communities that are served by Springfield Water and Sewer Commission are receiving credits.
Is it because of our I&I program?
That certainly can be part of it. That certainly helps without a doubt.
Right.
You get billed based on flow, the strength of your wastewater, primarily the two factors based on sampling that they do. Both of those influence the billing amount. So it's good news. We're trending in a slightly different direction than some of our peers right now, and that's always a good thing.
Right.
We did receive information that we're expecting a pretty significant credit on the drinking water side, as is every other community that's served by Springfield Water and Sewer Commission. And my understanding is that's based on a number of things. One were some fairly conservative projections that Springfield Water and Sewer Commission made regarding their costs and what some of their construction projects were going to cost, the schedule that they were going to implement their construction projects, and what type of financing they might receive for those projects. All of those things have worked out in that their financing costs have been lower than expected, their construction costs have been lower than expected, and they're looking at some of their projects not being deferred somewhat, so that they're not showing up in current year costs, but they'll likely be showing up in future year costs. The good news is the credit that we're looking will be going right back into the Water Enterprise Fund, and will be beneficial as we start taking a look at rates a year from now, and will go right to the bottom line of the department in terms of what may be necessary, if anything, in terms of rate adjustments to break even.
Well, that's some good news.
We are, another positive note, we are probably a week or two from getting our first billing from Altus Solar relative to the solar net metering, and we will be getting billed in conjunction with National Grid billing us. And the way it will work is that we will ultimately receive a 20% credit on the energy portion of our National Grid bills as a result of the solar net metering contract that we have with Altus Solar. Their system is up and running. The allocation of credits, something that's known as Schedule Z, where National Grid has to sign off on what accounts and what meters each credit will apply to, has been approved by National Grid. And at this point, it's really waiting for the next billing cycle for us to see the benefit that has come out of that contract. We are expecting, as we've talked about in the past, probably upwards of $100,000 per year savings.
When did they flip the switch?
I don't know with certainty. I think because they go through various testing phases.
Yeah.
I believe it was several weeks ago when the power was actually going to the grid, and that we started to receive, or they started receiving credits that they will then transfer to us. I don't know for certain when that date was.
And they refer to that as a Schedule Z?
Yeah, there's something called a Schedule Z, where they take the total power produced by the solar facility, and that power gets allocated on a percentage basis to individual meters that then receive credits. So we have committed to 60% of their facility, or a maximum of 3.75 megawatts per year. 60% of the credits they receive on every month will be ours, up to 3.75 megawatts worth of credits. We then subdivide those 60% of the credits to individual meters.
Okay.
For instance, the high school will be, and I forget offhand the percentage, but the high school will be the biggest beneficiary, because it's the biggest power consumer
Right.
of those credits, and we work down from our biggest to our next biggest down to probably our top 15 accounts that will benefit from those credits.
That's awesome.
The last financial item I wanted to mention is we've talked in the past about trying to do two things relative to our transfer station. We've been trying to increase the revenue, and I think we've made some good progress on that in terms of being able to work on an agreement where we're now realizing revenue from metals recycling, the metals that we receive at the transfer station, to the tune, I believe, we're expecting about $10,000 a year, maybe a little bit more. Last year, that was applied back into our account because it hadn't been allocated for in our budget development phase. This year, as you may recall, when we developed our budget, we increased the budget anticipating that revenue would occur. So that revenue will now come in and it'll go directly to the town's bottom line. But the town in exchange has agreed to increase our budget, recognizing that that revenue is going to come in. The other item we've been working on, and I think we've finally got some pretty good progress on, is reducing our operating cost. We had a local trash hauler approach us, and although I don't believe we'll ultimately be working with that local trash hauler, it allowed us to have some additional discussions with Waste Management, who's the current firm that is handling our mixed waste dumpster and our wood waste dumpster. And they have come back with us with a 5-year contract that is significantly less costly than our current contract. And I'm anticipating right now that that could be a $15,000 per year savings in cost. So when you take on the plus side, we're receiving $10,000 maybe more in revenue and maybe $15,000 per year in reduced expenses, you know, our net will be, we may be $25,000 better than we have been in previous years. So
Good.
And I think we're getting close to the
Going
place
in the
that we
right
want
direction.
to be. Yes.
Yeah.
And I think ultimately we've talked about it as we look towards closure of the landfill and really look at the long-term operation of that facility. There may be other opportunities for revenue realization in the future, but we really want to focus on getting it closed first and then look at the total long-term financial picture. A couple more items I've mentioned in the past that Tennessee Gas had requested that we provide a connection to them so that they could complete the testing of their pipeline, and that it was potentially using upwards of 500,000 gallons per day, of 500,000 gallons of water. We've provided some small amounts of water to them a couple of times to help with some of their preparation work. They are now actually starting on Thursday over probably a 2 to 3 day period looking to take upwards of 500,000 gallons of water. And they'll be doing that directly at the location they've set up behind Bay Path University, where they have a number of large temporary tanks that they've set up that they'll be feeding water into with backflow preventers set up between our system and those tanks, and then they'll be leading water out of those tanks, or pumping water out of those tanks into their pipeline. They did talk to us today about once they complete this testing, they have to treat the water that comes out of that pipeline, because it's, even though it's a gas product, not a liquid product, but a gas, if you there still contaminates the inside of the pipe with petroleum products and things like that. So all the water they take back out of the pipeline, they have to filter first. They have to get approval from Springfield Water and Sewer Commission to discharge it to the sewer system, but then they'll be looking to discharge it back to our sewer system, and we'll be working out with them billing for that wastewater discharge. So we'll be really selling in both ends of the system, selling water coming out of our system, and then the water, once it's been utilized and treated, put back into the sewer system.
So the water's going to go through the sewage treatment plant ultimately.
It will ultimately go to DeMonte's Island,
Yeah,
correct?
okay.
Yeah. It'll flow through our system to the Denzler Road pumping station, which is one of our mid-sized pumping stations, and we've already indicated to them what we believe we can handle in terms of gallons per minute of flow. So it will require them to meter that flow out over several days, so we don't create any operational issues.
Right.
Where do they get that in? At a manhole somewhere?
Yeah, there's a sewer line that runs right along Shaker Road, and then that line turns 90 degrees and runs cross-country parallel to the pipeline.
Oh, good.
So it's very accessible to them.
Oh, good. And it's gallon for gallon pretty much, right? Whatever they put in, they're taking out?
I would expect so. In fact, they may be putting a little bit more into the sewer system they take out, because they've told us they may be trucking in some additional water. Okay. So there could be a little bit of increase in terms of...
So we'll meter it somehow, are they?
Yeah, we're talking with them about how to do that metering. We haven't worked out the details yet, but that'll likely coming back out, they said, probably in a week to 2 after the testing begins, so that'll be a couple of weeks from now.
Awesome.
This time of year should not be any problem. Springtime, you know, it might be an issue.
Right.
We don't want to overtax our system, but this time we have plenty of capacity. Want to update the board on a couple of traffic light issues we've been working on. As you may know, we had some issues with the Parker and Allen Street traffic light, where it would, over part of last week, I guess it was, started a week ago, maybe even longer, it would occasionally revert to flash mode, where the primary mode along Parker Street would go to yellow flash, and the cross street at Allen Street would go to red flash, which is the way the system is designed to operate. If there's any sort of a problem, any sort of a conflict within the operation of the system, it reverts back to that mode. We finally, working with Northrop Electric, were able to isolate the issue, and it looks like what it was, and because the wires on that system, some of them are pretty old since they were installed in the late 1980s. Some of the wires had chafed, and so we had to do some wiring replacement, and there was a load switch internal to the panel that had to be replaced as well. Relatively low cost improvement or repairs when you take a look at the cost of replacing an entire signalized intersection, which is in the order of $100,000 to $150,000, spending hundreds or a couple of thousands of dollars to keep your system running and running well.
Right.
That location does have a new controller in it as well that we put in last year, so it has some old pieces, but the brain of the system is actually a relatively new piece of equipment. So I think we've got that behind us. We did work, as you may have seen, at the Maple Shade and North Main Street intersection. That's the location where we had some of our loop detectors that trigger the activation of the lights on the Maple Shade approach were not functional, so we had to replace those loops. And then we also, some of the amplifiers that take the signals from those loops had to be replaced as well. And I believe, based on everything I've seen, that signal is now back to the operation that it had been. We then lastly, and this is one I wanted to bring to your attention and look for input from you and any others as we go forward. Chestnut and Shaker Road, we talked about trying to make some improvements to the operation of that system, because certainly sometimes at night, for instance, drivers would come to that intersection and they would have to wait for the normal cycle when there was nobody on the cross streets. And we found out that the reason that was that the loop detectors, we were under the understanding that they weren't functional. Northrop tested them. They believed that they're functional, but they had been inactivated, so we reactivated the loops. What that has likely caused at this point is that drivers, the system, the way it had worked was that everything was on a timer, so it didn't matter if you pulled up to the stop line or didn't pull up to the stop line, the signal would continue operating on a pre-programmed time sequence. Now that the loop detectors are activated, if you don't pull up to the loop detector, you don't activate the loop detector. So we have had a couple of complaints come in where people have said they've had to wait at, I believe on the Chestnut approach coming down the hill, for a long period of time, a couple of light cycles. And I went out there myself and watched probably a half dozen or a dozen cycles, and based on everything I saw, it seems to be working the way it's intended to work. But if somebody was 10 feet away from the stop line, it may not activate that approach. So it may take some changes in driver behavior to make certain. But that said, I think we're going to continue to watch it and then continue to tweak it. We did hear that the Chestnut approach coming down the hill on Chestnut, the interval of that green cycle is probably a little bit on the short side, and we may be looking at lengthening that to give a little bit more time to get drivers through that queue. But it's a work in progress, and the goal of activating the loops is so that the system responds more to the traffic that is there at that time, versus just being on a programmed condition where it does the same thing all the time, whether it's 2 o'clock in the morning and there's no traffic, or 7 o'clock in the morning when there's traffic backed up in all directions.
Do we have to move the stop line forward to catch the loop?
No, I believe that was done a number of years ago. As you look at that approach, there's a painted out stop line that I believe may have been the original stop line, and it was pushed further down the hill, I believe, for that purpose. But again, we'll keep an eye out on it. If you drive through it, I've asked our staff, if they see anything out of the ordinary, it doesn't appear to be working.
That's your route.
It is.
Just
this morning.
Just let us know.
So 2 thoughts on that. One would
Sure.
be, can they put in the ladder logic? Can they just put if it's 3 minutes or 5 minutes, change it just so that somebody doesn't sit there for 12 minutes? Can they add that to the run? So
They may be able to do that. Yeah.
that would just be a thought. So it's something long, but at least if somebody doesn't hit the stop line, at least it'll cycle it through.
Sort of a hybrid of a fixed time and a strictly driver activated time.
Right. It's an if-else. So
Yep.
if the loops are working, great, but else,
Right.
grab that. And then the other one was, is there any way to just make them all go red, flashing? Like when Allen Street goes funky, let's say,
Right.
just make them red.
That's certainly the preference.
Even
of
if it's
the DPW.
$1,000, to my mind, it's got to be worth redoing the program, putting in a chip, whatever they got to do, because Connecticut's so close, so many four-way stops, and if you're coming on the red side, you don't know that the other guys got yellow.
Right.
So you assume they got red, and all of a sudden they go zipping through. It's like, whoa.
Right.
So,
You know, we've definitely looked at that. We've talked to Northrop about that. What the response we've gotten is that these signals, when they were permitted years ago, there was a state-approved signal sequence, and that standard, there's an industry standard called the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices, MUTC book, that everything is, that MUTCD standard says when a signal fails, it's supposed to go to yellow on the primary path and red in the secondary. Doesn't mean you have to do that, but for that to happen and to protect everybody, we may need to go back to the state and get the original permit for
I don't
those
know what you
signals
guys
changed.
think, but I just think
I think a four-way red
anything goes
is a
wrong,
lot
it's
safer
four-way red.
situation.
And
Right. I've actually asked Northrop at Parker and Allen last April when we were working to do that, and they said at that point we can't do it because that's not the way the signal was permitted to operate from a liability standpoint even.
Right, so I get it, we got
Yeah.
lots of streets to finish, we got all
Right.
kinds of stuff going on, but somewhere in the scope of work,
Yeah, it's the
can we
right
look
way.
into every street light in town, if it falses, doesn't do what it's supposed to do, even shopping centers, everything, just red,
Right.
and that way we're safe.
Right.
You know, as opposed to somebody thinks they're all red, and you start to go, and then somebody yellow goes ripping through, you know, it's.
Wasn't there an accident at Parker and Allen?
There was a couple of days prior to, yeah, there was a
That's actually me a couple of years ago. Someone was coming up the hill on Allen Street going 50. I was going across. Someone on the other side of the light pulled out of their driveway. This guy didn't acknowledge that our back end was sticking out the street, and he smashed right into us and totaled the car.
Nice.
So
not tomorrow,
it's that
but.
hill coming up that's
Right.
the most dangerous.
So 100% agree, it's the way we need to be. If there's a process, we likely will have to follow to get there.
Okay, all good.
I didn't realize that each one was permitted.
They were originally, and any private firm gets concerned about liability. So I said, tell me what button to push, and I'll push the button. But there are some wiring changes that they have to make as well in order to make it work the way.
Yeah, and if the safety officers have to be involved, they don't agree, I get it. To me, it just like, eeks. Right.
Yeah, no, it's clearly we've had the discussion with the police department. They would want exactly what you've requested. So everybody from the town standpoint's on the same page.
Okay, good.
Last item I wanted to mention was just for the record to note that the DPW at this point has officially taken on responsibility for utility bill payment, as well as probably a greater level of involvement for the Little Red Schoolhouse and the historical building in town. What had happened, and I don't know the history of it, but for quite a few years, those responsibilities had rested under the Board of Selectmen. And the Board of Selectmen, for instance, had a separate line item, budget item for paying the electricity bill and the natural gas bill or the fuel oil bill at those facilities, and those have now shifted to the DPW. Made sense to us, made sense to the town accountant that if we're handling those responsibilities for every other town building, to put them on our responsibility as well. We maintain those facilities from a building envelope standpoint. We plow those facilities, et cetera. It gets us a little bit closer to them. We actually spent probably half a day, Bruce. I think there was Little Red Schoolhouse because of the fact that that's really shared by the cultural committee, who then has a number of different organizations that utilize that building. It became a collecting area for a lot of stuff. So we spent about a half a day taking, and there's a new chairwoman of the cultural committee who said, I told every organization, if you don't get your stuff out of the basement by this date certain, it's going away, because there was 20 years of stuff in that basement that isn't in the basement any longer. So we're just, we're working with them to keep those buildings in better shape and take on more responsibility for those buildings.
Makes sense.
And that is it for me tonight.
Okay. Thank you very much. Bruce, you got the operations building manager's report for us?
Yes.
All right.
Quite a few things. Last week, the operations manager was on vacation, so we had a lot of work to do around the schools. A lot of it was weeding beds, trimming bushes, going through all the schools and making sure everything looked presentable. Weed whacking along curves, along buildings. So we were pretty successful and everything looked great. We also, after the repavement of the back parking lot of Mountain View School, we had Mr. Esposito, our line painting expert, go out and reline that parking lot, and also did the basketball courts behind that building also. We repaired all the broken fence posts for the guardrail behind the high school also, probably about half a dozen, if not more. Those guardrails, fixed those up. We brought some millings to the back of the high school also. I don't know if you guys are aware that some of that parking area near the superintendent's office where the single parking slots kind of left off and there was always holes and everything else, so we brought some millings in there. Redid that area. We also cut all the brush along Birchland Park School, all along the outside edges, got all the branches away from all the light poles and everything else to keep the lights intact, because we did have some small damage. Covers came off and everything else from branches when it gets windy out. We also replaced a fiber box, damaged fiber box over at Birchland Park School. That was kind of in the brush. I think one of our plows or something hit that over our past winter. We also went through all the schools, swept all the schools, so we're pretty happy with the outcome of all those buildings, and I think they look great. Also, on another note, other items that we did last week was over at the senior center. We had a downspout. We had a little sinkhole along the back side of the building. We had a broken clay pipe in the ground. We repaired that. We also prepped many areas, or a couple areas, for the seal coat project for Westwood and Fenway. We had a sweep. We actually had to do some milling over on Powder Hill Road. That some loose asphalt kind of popped up at last minute. We also set up quite a big setup for the bonfire on Friday last week, between fencing, quite a bit of fencing, probably about 500 feet of fencing. Prepped the area for the firewood, went and picked up the firewood and got that over to the fire station. We also actually finished up spreading all the millings up at Pine Knoll on the entry driveway, exit driveway. Finished that all up today, so hopefully that'll stand up to the rain. I know we have had some significant rain in the past few weeks, so we did have it partially completed. It seemed to hold pretty good, so we'll see what happens going into the future.
Over at Birchland Park, a resident called me saying that the sign, the redstone sign that has this masonry cap on it, is failing.
Okay.
I don't know if you've noticed that.
I have not, but I will look at it.
Yeah.
The cap on the entry sign off Elm Street?
Not off of Elm, off of Hanwood. I think there's a duplicate.
Okay.
That one.
The metal sign?
No, the redstone, and then it's got a masonry. It looks like the masonry cap is failing.
Okay.
The redstone's starting to deteriorate. Maybe it needs some pointing and some sealer, while the stone is still in good shape.
You got it. Okay. So on to the building report. I kind of put in front of you my annual inspection services kind of template, which I go through every year to try to track our expenditures. On the upper part is our annual inspections, and in the lower part is our summer project list. So our annual inspection total cost for this year, I do have some straggling bills that are coming in sporadically, is about $85,931. Last year, our expenditure was about $95,528, and the year before that was $87,121. So I think we're pretty much on track. Not much has changed in the last 3 years. I have done some finagling when it comes to vendors, dropped some vendors, and try to massage it a little bit to keep our costs constant without going up. You can see the summer projects which we have completed. I believe there's only a few open projects, that mitigating transformer for boiler room 2. We have a couple circulator pumps which will be rebuilding shortly. Johnson Controls going through the automation system over at Birchland Park, which will be scheduled. I believe we have that scheduled. Where are we here? Sheet. That is scheduled for
September 2nd.
Yep, for September 2nd of this week, actually, to do that, but we're kind of waiting to turn on the heating system before we do that to calibrate things. You can't calibrate when it's 90 degrees out.
Not this week.
Yeah. So that'll be put off, but we're looking pretty good. Everything has gone to plan, so if you guys have any questions on that, I'll be happy to answer them.
So we got 150. How much, what do we got? So that's out of our building maintenance budget.
This is district-wide,
Yeah.
so our total maintenance
Yep.
budget just for the schools is $180,000. That's supplies and professional technical services. And usually at this time of the year for the school department, we're usually around 50% spent. And I don't have my budget sheet to actually refer to that as far as the school system.
But you're well over 50% spent. No? What am I missing?
Well, the problem is, see, all these annual inspections, that's town buildings along with schools.
Got it. So you got 180 plus something else
Yeah, exactly.
in the other buildings.
Yes.
So 180 is just school.
180 is just schools, and like I said, that 85,000 for my annual inspections,
Yeah. That's about
that is
50%.
district-wide. So a lion's share of this is schools, okay? And I didn't break that up because it'd be a kind of a nightmare for me to try to
Right.
separate schools from everything else.
But you'll get through the rest of the fiscal
Yes.
typically with just
Yes.
regular maintenance.
Yes, it's nothing
This is the big
surprising.
Okay.
Okay, as far as the budget's concerned, it's, like I said, I do a lot of my spending in the first 2 months of the fiscal year, unfortunately.
Yep.
So just to get the important things done first, then we kind of bring it back and then address projects as needed.
Excellent.
And last year at this time, we had a $20,000 surprise, I believe, with the hot water
Exactly.
tank that had to be replaced, and we made it
Yep.
successfully through the year, so
Right.
Good.
that helps.
So like I said, a lot of those items, even the, I have to replace the hot water tanks down in the summer projects list, so actually you can actually take that out of the total project because that's a capital expense.
Oh, all right.
Okay, so
Okay.
some of these,
Are actually capital.
some of them are capital, a lot of
Okay.
them aren't. Yeah, that's actually the only one that isn't part of the total line item. So you gotta figure for the total budget spent for this summer is $125,000 roughly,
Okay.
okay? So we're right on track, I guess you could say. Excellent, sorry. Another project which we actually just completed yesterday, we did some energy conservation work over at Maple Shade School. We had Rise Engineering come out during our visit, me and Mr. Parent, toward the National Grid Energy Summit earlier last spring. Rise Engineering came up and did a survey of the entire facility, identified all our 71 steam traps, and identified that 20 steam traps were not actually functioning properly. So we addressed that. We had our in-house plumber go in and replace those steam traps this past week, and tested the system yesterday, and it's all up and running. I'm waiting for the final report. The total cost of the project with the engineering fees and everything else was $5,935. Our incentive offer was going to be $2,967. So our annual savings will be about 1,468 therms, and our estimated cost per therm is $1.15. So our annual operating cost savings will be about $1,688.
That's a win, huh?
Yeah, and we did go through steam trap traps probably about 5 years ago, and we address them as needed when you get cold areas and stuff, but it was kind of good to inventory the whole entire facility. We actually have a spreadsheet now that was supplied by Rise Engineering with model numbers and everything else, so
Excellent.
it was pretty educational.
And one of the benefits we received too is we took a look at the total project cost. We were able to value our time. So with that $5,000 and change, that includes our labor. So when utility companies look at sharing that cost at 50%, they paid for 50% of our labor basically as well. So
Excellent.
it was
That's
really
good.
Yeah, it was 2 days. It was only 2 days to change those all out, so it's
Excellent.
good. Also, another energy conservation project. We're going to be changing out the rotary decorative lights here at the center of town to LEDs. Actually, we're getting supplied, again, the materials for the project. We'll be just installing them. We have an installation of 57 new LED lamps at a cost to the town of $1,140. And the incentive applied to the cost is $855, so minus that from the total cost. And our total annual savings per year will be about $2,490 to get rid of those metal halides. So the project will pay for itself.
in months, not even years. It was
Right.
less than a year.
Right.
Yeah.
So another good project that we're doing. We're also looking at the high school. We had some, these projects were kind of spearheaded by Eddie Legou and Dan Hellier with John Alba from MGY Solutions. They actually were looking at the high school, doing both gyms and changing those fixtures out to T5 LEDs. But there's a significant upfront cost to the town for those projects. And so we're looking to see if it actually makes sense to do that based on the payback period. So the large gym lights, project cost is roughly about $21,000. The utility incentive is about $5,460. And then the final cost to the town would be about $16,236. So it's a big upfront cost for that portion.
It works out to about a 5-year payback. So
Right.
so 5 years in the energy payback is a relatively long amount of time.
Right.
And with the future of the high school maybe a little bit uncertain, or future pieces of the high school, that's one that we in the school department need to think about a little bit before we say let's
Right.
pull the trigger on it.
Right, because the actual gym lights aren't that old. That's why I think the incentive isn't that great.
Right.
Because we did those a few years ago with occupied sensors and everything else. It's just we're at that time where the warranty runs out, so we're looking for new ways to see if we can save even additional money. We're also looking at the exterior lighting over at the high school too. Project total cost is about $23,825. The incentive is about $4,400, and the final project cost to the town is about $19,000. So you're looking at about between $38,000 and $40,000 for the total projects. So we're looking at it and see if we can get creative and see where we need to go.
And the payback on that, they're both projects are just about 5 years, so they're sort of the same situation for both. The other thing we're looking at in the high school gymnasium is, if you're familiar with LED lights, they're very bright, but it's a different type of light and the light spread is a bit different. So Bruce has the energy firm looking at a lighting contour plan basically to make certain that the gym, they're happy with the way the gym is lit right now. We want to make certain that we don't change the lighting type and find out that we've got concentrated spots that are well lit and we've got dark spots in between. So we just, again, it's this one takes a little thought, a little research, a little evaluation. We may ultimately go that direction. If we do, the good thing is that this does qualify for on-the-bill payback. So the capital cost could be funded through payments made on the utility bill over a period of time, so it makes the cash flow work out better, because that way it can get funded not through our capital or our operating account. It can get funded directly by the utility through the utility account at zero interest.
That was my next question.
Yeah, we're actually, John.
Zero interest?
Zero interest,
Yeah, and so actually they came out, John Alba, and just to give us some of the materials for the center lights, we actually had them run through this facility, and we're going gonna go run through a couple more facilities and see if we can do some creative things here, especially with the metal halides out in the garage area too. So gonna get that moving along also. Capital projects, Birchland Park facade repairs on the drive-it system. That was completed 2 days ahead of schedule on August 25th. It's 26th. It came out great. Armani Construction was a great firm to work with. Very hard workers, especially over this summer's heat and everything else. I was up there numerous times. It had to be 150, 160 degrees up there, and they're up there with trowels and everything else applying it. So they did a great job. I'm very happy with the outcome of the work, and I believe the school department is very happy also. We also have gone out to bid for the 80 kW generator for the senior center. The bid release date was August 24th, and bids will be open September 8th on Tuesday at 10 a.m. The bid consists of the unit itself. The DPW will be installing the unit. We did make provisions before we installed or repaved that site. We brought conduits, I believe two 3-inch conduits and one 1-inch conduit into the building, and all ready to go to pull wires for a generator. We just got to pour a concrete pad and purchase the unit. So we'll be looking forward to get that project going. And I believe that's all I have.
Excellent.
Okay, very good. This year I'll start with the roads project. We're very happy to see we're nearing the end. We still have Prospect Street and Chestnut to do yet. Last Friday and Monday, the micro-surfacing project was done. I will be walking that from one end to the other tomorrow morning just to see any imperfections I see, to document all that. If there's anything for follow-up with seal coating. Let's see, so this week they finished the driveways on Maple Shade. They're working on today on Porter. Next they'll be going to Hamden to do the driveways and the roadway tie-ins. And then obviously Westwood Street, we've got the topsoil to do yet. Let's see. Driveways this week. Prospect Street will be paved. The scheduled date is next Tuesday. It was Friday. They bumped it up a couple days, so that'll be done for next Tuesday. Today they were putting in subdrain. I believe I didn't get up there at the end of the day, but I believe they should have finished it. If not, it should be nearly finished, almost to the end. Let's see. So the microsurfacing was again Friday and yesterday morning. It was great. There was a lot of coordination involved. We had the subcontractor on the lane road job actually did a lot of the structure adjustments. We changed out a bunch of structures, and in fact the road crews here helped out because we wanted asphalt as the final surface rather than concrete. So it was great. It took a little bit of work, but we get it all done ahead of them. And then we get Columbia Gas late in the game. We kept reminding them of their job, and they came in the last day. They started to get a trench across. Sometimes you can keep telling them, but until it rises to the top of their list for some reason. So you tell them you're actually paved the next day, I think they realize.
Last day, huh?
But they did infrared. I mean, we put them through the ringer on that, and hopefully we won't have any issues there. It was at the end of Melwood, just around the corner.
One item we did just bring the board's attention to on Maple Shade, we did end up steepening up a couple of driveway approaches as you get past, I guess, one on this side of Breezy Knoll and a couple past Breezy Knoll. You may not have ever been aware of it, but those driveways actually extended into the street.
Yeah.
And which can be problematic in terms of snow plowing, in terms of flow of water along the gutter line, in terms of safety with bicycle riders, etc. going. So we ended up steepening those approaches a little bit, maybe a little bit less than the property owners would prefer, but they're serviceable, they're functional, and we were really focusing on making the roadway safe and balancing the needs of the resident versus the needs of the drivers on Maple Shade.
Let's see, I think that that's it. Oh, the one thing we are taking a look, Chestnut Street was the last piece to start. They haven't started over there yet. We had a water main break, or a couple of them, just the one in the winter, and those areas have been patched up. And we're just considering, we'll probably have to decide tomorrow whether or not we hold off. Maybe it makes sense to wait because we know we've got a water main break. Maybe we don't want to pave the road and then have some settlement. So we may think it might make sense to wait until next year's project and just include it with that. Haven't mentioned the lane yet, but we'll see. We'll make a decision tomorrow, I think.
You just did.
If they're watching.
That's how quick they put it up, yeah.
I don't know if I should ask Ray if he watches. Okay, so that's that. The second thing I just want to mention that at the landfill transfer station, the compost pad area, they've done a great job clearing. We got a lot of material moved. I had an area we could topo, so me and Frank are out there before it got too hot, topoing the area to get ready for the second compost pad, and the hard pack we'll put down. We did full topo there. We're going to tie that into the original survey from 2004 to really get a good handle on what we've got out there for grades, and that'll help us when we get into I'll do the final grading for the landfill closure itself and the drainage. So that was done today. We'll set some grade stakes and then we'll get moving. The other thing on the landfill, we got a monitoring well couplet to put in. We need to do that to the end of October. I already got a price from Seaboard, and we may get another or two. It's a low cost, I think a $5,000 item. And there's one that's a bedrock well. That's why it's a little more than you would expect. They got to go quite deep. I think it's 70 feet anticipated. So that, and then in the fall, I guess the next one would be the tree clearing. I think might happen this fall. That will be good. And then, let's see, I guess that's it on the compost area. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is just Green Mountain, the test and seal sewer project. Everything is done with the exception of the cured in place piece out in front of the Bentley restaurant, about 300 feet. We did a plug. We plugged those to tie into the brook, and we plugged the plug had kind of failed a little bit, so we plugged up that piece, but that next section of sewer was in pretty rough shape. We reviewed the sewer, and they gave us a price that cured and placed that one section of pipe. It's significant water coming high.
It needs to physically be replaced?
No. You cured in place. They'll put a seal.
Oh, cured in place. Okay.
A sock in the pipe.
Yep.
Just that one section.
Yep.
What it is a felt material that they impregnate with epoxy.
Yep.
And then they heat the sock to cure the epoxy, and it sets in place and forms a pipe that's as strong as the original pipe once it's all done.
Right. They were trying to get in this week. We told them to hold off with everything we had going. Actually, they're hoping for today, and we pushed them off. We're trying to get a date so we can close out that project next week sometime. So that's all.
With all the activity, I think it was yesterday, the police department indicated they had 14 details on the street. So just getting enough details, and it's not unique to East Long Meadow. There's a lot of towns doing a lot of work right now this summer, and they're bringing in people from Granby, from Wilbraham, from Hamden, etc., to cover all the details.
Okay, if there's any questions?
No, that's awesome. Okay, I have one other business because I was actually jotted it down and you mentioned it. So streetlights, are we still doing all right with the police department reporting streetlights out? Because people are still telling me they're out.
No, I count all the time the streetlights out when I travel around.
I haven't heard anything. Corey's usually has the list, but I will follow up with her, see if she's getting reports from the
And then I
police department.
think the second part of that question is it time to actually have the utility company come to a meeting with us and discuss LEDs and streetlights, and because it makes sense to me that if we can save that kind of money on lights.
We don't own them, that's the whole.
No, I understand that, but we're paying, I mean, unless we push them, I suspect they're just gonna leave them because we're paying a pretty healthy number per light per month.
It's $100 a year we pay, right?
Yeah, so there's gotta be some kind of program.
And there may be an opportunity. It'd be a significant capital investment, but some communities have made that decision, and the utility company are making it easier to make that decision to purchase your streetlights, to take them over so that you directly benefit from the savings long term. So yeah, getting everybody in a room and talking about.
And this might be totally bizarre, but solar
Solar where?
streetlights.
Oh,
I've seen them in some communities where there's actually a panel up on the pole, collects the sun, the light, and then during the night the lights go on. So I just want to get a little more aggressive maybe with, instead of just paying 100 grand a year or whatever we're paying, and especially when the lights aren't on. What
Right.
can we do to bring some new technology, some new ideas? But I think I saved some pictures. I can't remember the town I was in exactly, but I think I saved some pictures that I took. That I can actually show you, but their panel's about yay big.
it's kind of like the
They're on-
crosswalk sign.
Yeah, they're on the poles, and then they take care of the lights. But
UMass did a parking lot with the Mullet Center, I believe.
I don't know. I mean, it seems to me the technology in solar is getting better and better.
Right.
So at some point, do we even have to pay the power company? You know?
I guess like you
They'll
said, the
rent
first step
space
is
off the
to
pole.
own them first. We can't do anything until we own them.
Right.
And see what that cost is.
And it's all things we can do. There are certainly some streets that would be very amenable to solar street lights because you don't have any trees encroaching in the street lights, but there are a lot of streets as well where
Right.
half the day there's no sun that shines on that street light.
I'm thinking this is more like going to our electronic meter reading.
Yep.
You know, you don't do it all in 1 year, but is there some phased-in program over the next 10 years that gets us someplace instead of just paying for lights that aren't on? You know, because I think we pay whether they're on or not.
Every broken
There's
light.
no meter on them. There's X number of lights, and we're paying, so it's just not right.
Yep. Got it. Cool. We'll set it up.
Any other business? Anything else?
Other than
Schedule another meeting.
15th is 2 weeks.
Is good for me.
Works for me.
September 15th, 5 o'clock, service building. And then I'll entertain a motion,
Motion to adjourn. And go into executive.
go into executive session.
That's for strategy with respect to negotiations with non-union personnel. And will not reconvene.
Okay. And second?
Second the motion.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Mr. Barrick, aye.
Mr. Mayberry, aye. Meeting adjourned into executive session.